Hey, how's it going, folks? Today we're going to be tying the Rooster fish version of the Kinky Muddler by Jonny, and I've been tying these for some guides recently, so I figured it was a good time to make a video on it. As always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below. We're getting started with a Gamakatsu SL12S big game hook here in a size 4 odd, and we're going to be using some white bucktail here. After taking all the short hairs out of the way, we're just going to go ahead and tie this in with a couple loose wraps. Unlike normally where we just tie this in at the top, following Jonny instructions, we're going to be spreading this around the hook shank 360 degrees before securing it down. Now we're using Danville monofilament thread here. This is going to allow us to work with the material on this fly and not build up too much thread. Now taking some white saddle hackle here, we're going to be using 4 pieces of white saddle hackle and tying these in. Now it's important, we're not going to be tying them perfectly flat, top or bottom. We're going to be tying this in at a 45-degree angle and essentially creating a tented hackle tail. Both pieces of hackle curve in, sitting at a 45-degree angle. It's going to create a pocket underneath the feathers. Now it's important to use just a couple loose wraps so we don't pinch the hackle down, and we're going to secure it once we get all of them tied on there and where we want it. The other thing that is important is ensuring that I guess you could say the top of the tented hackle is essentially perfectly even on the hook shank, so it's not leaning over left or right. And then once you get it where you like it, you can kind of pinch down the hackle and then wrap tight nice in front, kind of building up some thread, and then we can go ahead and trim it, and this will stop the hackle from flaring out. This is interesting. This is something Jonny does to not only prevent the hackle from fouling, but it also helps create that pocket of this bucktail and tented hackle. So we're going to pinch the hackle, lift it up, wrap underneath the bucktail and hackle, and then wrap forward. Wrap a couple times and do that 2 or 3 times, and we're creating a anti-foul resistant tail as well as creating that pocket for even more movement. Then we're going to go ahead and take some super glue here. Every single time I tie a collar or a section, I'm going to take super glue, and I'm going to also take a hard piece of paper and spread it around. Now here it's important to reach underneath where the hackle was tied, where we wrap that thread, so that way the fly is durable. But a little bit of super glue on the threads each time we tie a collar is going to ensure the fly is durable. So now taking some white Marabou, we're going to create a nice transition here in between the hackle and the Slinky Fiber that we're going to be Vtying shortly after this. If you have a nice piece of Marabou, you can palmer it. I've ran out of white Marabou, so in a much easier way, we're going to achieve essentially the same thing as palmering here by just pinching off some Marabou at the length we like and then just tying it in essentially right in front of where that hackle bump is. And then using my thumbnail, I'm just going to spread this around, using a little bit of super glue after each tie to ensure it's durable. So now we're going to be V-tying the body. The first 2 sections we're going to be using Slinky Fiber, and the last 2 sections we're going to be using Steve Farrar blend. Steve Farrar blend is essentially something like Slinky Fiber, very similar material, just mixed with angel hair or flash. So for the V-tie, it's very simple. We're going to take a pinch of Slinky Fiber. You don't want to use too much because you're just going to end up wasting it. So you got to find a kind of nice balance here. I like to add a little bit as I go, but to V-tie it, we're just going to tie it directly in the middle. I'm starting on the bottom here, and you want the material offset so it's sitting at an angle, because what we're going to do is after getting some top and bottom here and wrapping forward just to ensure that it's even, we're going to fold it back. And the reason why you can see here the material on the top is offset towards us So we're going to fold this away, and then we're going to wrap right on top of it with a couple tight thread wraps here. The whole idea here is we're building a 3D profile by essentially having that material flare out to the sides. And then after we wrap our thread here and get it secured, we can kind of spread that material on the sides. Now it's also important to ensure that our thread dam is even top and bottom, or our thread wrapping, so that it's just kind of similar to a hollow tie. We don't want the V-tie to be offset top or bottom. A little bit of super glue to make sure it's durable. So essentially we're just going to move forward here. I like to move up ever so slightly, a couple millimeters if you will. And we're just going to tie our next V-tie. I keep it essentially the same length as the last one. I usually, because I'm tying these in bunches, or I'm tying these flies in batches, I usually cut off a bunch of material into sections. So I'll have like two sizes. This size, the rear two collars will be longer, and then the front two sections will be much shorter because we are going to be trimming this fly. So over time you'll learn the length of the material and how much to put on there so you don't end up wasting any. You can see at one point here I had to readjust my thread wrapping to ensure that the V-tie was even top and bottom. And then as always, a little bit of super glue and spread it around. So this is a 4/0 hook. We're going to do 3 V-ties here, and I go pretty heavy on the material. Again, I wouldn't say it's like the width of a pencil. I'd say maybe 2/3 the width of a pencil, maybe even a little less. And now we're going to use Slinky Fiber, and you can see this material is shorter because of the shape of the profile. When we trim it, we don't need it to be this long. So we're essentially just going to V-tie this in, top and bottom. And again, I'll add material as I go if I need to fill up the profile at all. Similar sort of thing here, we're gonna V-tie. I find in the collar before the hollow tie, so essentially we're gonna do a hollow tie after this, if you will, with the Slinky Fiber. It's best not to use too much material and not to build too much of a thread bump. So that way when we do our hollow tie, the thread bump isn't going to flare it out, so we don't want to have unevenness in the head when we trim it. So after a little bit of super glue, we're going to go ahead and take our last bit of material here, and we're essentially going to hollow tie this. Now, I'm not tying it in on the butt ends. I'm essentially doing like a V-tie hollow tie, if you will, in terms of how we're attaching it to the hook. I'm not offsetting it. I'm just tying it directly on top or bottom. But we're tying it in the middle here. And then what we're going to do is, when I get the material where I like it, you want a fairly good amount of material on this section so we could fill it up. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bobbin here, or I'm going to take a spool of thread or a little pusher tool, an empty pen, and I'm going to push this back and I'm going to build my thread dam. At least try to. Now, don't panic. Nobody panic. We're just going to, while holding it, luckily I was able to pull the thread out and re-secure it. So essentially we're just going to build a thread dam here just like you would with any hollow tie. Not building thread up on top of the material, but in front of the material, just to put some tension in front of it and push it back. Now we're going to throw some whip finishes on here and we can start trimming the fly. I'll show you how we start building the profile. But quick before we do that, we are going to brush the fly. It's always a good idea to have a fine wire dog brush, or some sort of brush like this when you're working with synthetics, because sometimes the material will get stuck under itself. So now it's very simple. You see I'm going to pinch the fly between my thumb and index finger, and you can kind of adjust the angle, and we're going to use our hand here as a guide. And we're just going to take a little bit off the top and bottom here, kind of starting with the shape of the fly. And you can see again, pinching it, you can adjust the angle of the pivot point or where you're holding the hook shank. And that'll change the profile if you want it larger or smaller. Now we definitely want to take material off the sides here. Again, you can tie this fly in a sparse way where you don't need to trim it much. I like to go a little bit heavier, and that way I can kind of trim the fly and get a really nice 3D profile. So I'm just working some material off the sides here, and as I go I'm going to rotate and kind of look at the fly and see whether or not I need to take some off. It's important that we take a certain amount of material off just so that the fly swims properly, because too much Slinky Fiber on there and Dorado fiber will cause the fly to either not turn over properly or also not sink at all. So we're essentially just kind of thinning down the fly. It's a good tip is you can take your scissors, don't angle them necessarily in towards the fly, angle them out. So that way, if you are going to trim, you don't end up trimming too much material off at once. We want to go pretty slowly here, because we can't add material back. And you can see I'm definitely working on the sides here. I don't like having too much of that Slinky Fiber on the sides of the fly. So I'm kind of thinning that down slowly. Now we are going to be gluing eyes on here, some 3D eyes, and that's going to kind of change the shape of the fly ever so slightly. We're going to be doing one more final kind of cleanup trim after we glue the eyes. This is a 3D fly that we're tying here, so look at it from every angle. Take it off the vise if you don't have a rotary vise, and front, back, just give it a good look over and trim the fly to your liking. So now taking some 5/16 3D holographic eyes here from saltwaterflies.com, we're going to be using some E6000 industrial construction glue, I'm sorry. And we're going to be just applying a very small amount to the back side of the eye. Now what this is going to do, we're going to use the eye as like a little tool. We're going to apply a dollop to the fly here, and then we're going to apply a little bit more and then just push this down. Now I like to place it more forward than I want, because what we do is we push the eye down on that pile of glue and then push it back at the same time, putting pressure on it. That's going to spread that glue evenly behind the eye. Now you don't want to put too much because it'll just go all over the place, alright? And try not to get the glue on the eye because it makes a mess. So you see me using my thumbnail here. But we're going to push this down. You really want to push it down and work that glue into the synthetic material and down to the hook shank. And it's going to give us a very secure, nice and durable eye. But we're going to go one step further. We're going to let this dry for a while, making sure that the eyes are even top and bottom and where we like them. You want this to dry for probably about, I'd say, 15 minutes or so. It'll start hardening up and then it'll expand. So you just want to come back and kind of push them down so they're nice and secure, because it will expand slightly. And now we're going to trim the fly one more time just to get a nice even profile before applying some liquid fusion. So you can see after pushing those eyes, some of that material kind of got flared up at the top. So I'm just going to go through again one more time, because we are going to apply liquid fusion to the head of the fly, to the front section. So anything in the front here, I like to get nice and trimmed finally before we put any glue on it. It's also important to work your scissors at different angles, because again, we are trying to get a 3D profile. So a lot of times bait fish will be skinnier near the top or belly, let's say, so it's a good idea to kind of observe the bait that you're trying to imitate and think about it from a 3D perspective when you're trimming this fly. So when we get it where we like it, we're going to take some liquid fusion here and apply some essentially directly on top of the eyes. And I also go a little bit in front of the eyes. We don't want to put too much on there, because you'll see I'm going to actually put a little bit more here if I feel like there's not enough. But what we're going to do is, taking my bodkin here, I'm just going to work this liquid fusion 360 degrees around the eye. I want to make sure that that liquid fusion goes past the eye and touches the material. Now the eye's pretty durable with that E6000, but this liquid fusion is going to ensure that these eyes are essentially not going to fall off, or at least not it's going to take quite a lot of fish for this fly to get pretty beat up. but it's also going to keep the head of the fly nice and the profile nice and durable. So you can see here, I'm just going to speed it up, but essentially we're just going to add some more and just keep working it. You don't want to go too far back. I just like to go, when I put the liquid fusion on the actual Slinky Fiber where there's no eyes, I only go about to where I'd say half of the eye. I don't go too far back with it. But on the eyes, I make sure to go all the way back and touch the material right behind it. And there you go. That's how we tie the roosterfish version of Jonny King's Kinky Muddler. And you can see the tented hackle here, this pocket in the back. It's very important to have that hackle tied at a 45-degree angle because that pocket is just going to catch all the water and the tail's going to be going crazy. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this fly. I've been tying a ton of these recently for a group of guys going down to Baja, and hopefully they have good success down there and catch a bunch of fish. But these are a lot of fun to tie. We have the killie version that we tied, but I just wanted to make a video showing how I tie these larger roosterfish versions. There's some great videos out there of Jonny King's tying these, but I wanted to get a video with some kind of close-ups and nice detail for anyone that was wondering how I tie these. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the video. My name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new fly tying and fly fishing videos coming out every week. We have live fly tying on Friday nights and early access for members. Well, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you have a great season out there this year. And till the next video, tight lines.